The thing about the Super Bowl this year, Super Bowl 58, is that it's in Las Vegas. It's in Las Vegas. If you've ever paid attention to the Super Bowl or followed it over the years, which I know many of you could care less about this, but it's never been in Las Vegas. And there's a reason for that. The NFL was very careful not to associate itself in any way with gambling. The commissioners would never let a Super Bowl take place in Las Vegas. In 1993, the NFL joined a couple of other organizations to lobby Congress for tighter controls for sports betting. In 2003, they famously would not let Las Vegas advertise during the Super Bowl. That was when they came up with the advertisement, "What happens here stays here." And the NFL said, no, they can't advertise during the Super Bowl. That promotes gambling. And so they've always wanted to make sure, thinking that associating with gambling would ruin its credibility. And so this year, things are, shall we say, a little different. If you watch any of the hype leading up to the game, not only will there be analysis of the offense and the defense and the quarterbacks, but there will be analysis of how to bet on the game. How to bet on not only the game, but also certain very famous celebrities watching the game. And you can bet on all of it, and it's working. So what changed? What changed? In a word, money. Money is what changed. In 2018, the Supreme Court opened up sports gambling in a powerful way and made it available to everybody in every state. And so it was only a matter of time before the NFL just could not say no to the enormous piles of cash sitting there on the table being offered to them. In 2021, the NFL said that they were starting a deal with some of the companies like FanDuel and DraftKings and Caesars that would pay them nearly $1 billion through 2026. The gambling company is going to pay them $1 billion to partner with them. And you'd think that's a lot of money, except that this year, 68 million people will bet $23 billion on today's game. $23 billion will be bet on today's game. That's what money does. It changes all of your so-called convictions about things. And so just watching this, it's just fascinating as an outsider to say, well, when you have that much money riding on it, all of a sudden you don't have any worries about your integrity or the sport anymore. You're in it to make money, and this is a good way to make money. Strangely, the NFL is still very hard on its own players. They won't let their own players bet on the games. They'll suspend them if they do. I just say, good luck with that. Good luck with that. And it reminds you that really American history is about money. Money is what has driven America really almost more than anything else. More than honor or history or ethnicity or class or moral conviction. The thing that has driven American history is money. Money is the root of our greatest innovations and our greatest scars. Without money, there would have been no reason to enslave people. That was motivated by money. And so our racism is rooted in money, but also our innovation. The desire to make a buck makes better and better mousetraps all the time. I say this because Jesus talked a lot about money. If you read the Gospels, Jesus talked a lot about money, which is very strange because he never asked anybody for any money. As far as we can tell, Jesus never owned anything, and there is no account of Jesus asking people to give him money. He wasn't fundraising, he wasn't developing support or anything like that, but he talked a lot about money. And I think it's because Jesus knew that what people do with their money is connected to their heart. And Jesus cared a lot about people's hearts. Let me show you what I mean. One of the most famous teachings of Jesus on money is in the Sermon on the Mount. And we have been looking at verses on the Sermon on the Mount, and we've been asking the question, how is it that Jesus wants us to live? Jesus calls us salt and light. meaning that we are a preservative in the world and we illuminate the darkness in the world. But the only way that we can illuminate the world or preserve the world is by being different than the world. So we've been looking at various convictions of how we're different than the world, how we're different in how we treat our enemies, how we treat our sexuality, how we treat something like media or social media that we talked about last week. But one of the biggest convictions is how we treat money. So here's what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19. He says this: "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. "Do not store up for yourself," he says in verse 19, "treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy." Jesus is just talking to people about their habits with money, and he says, if your goal is to accumulate a lot of money to be very secure here on earth, if your identity and your security, if what you're trying to do is accumulate money here on earth, it's a very risky proposition. In Jesus' day, a lot of people's wealth was wrapped up in fine garments or precious metals, or there weren't a lot of banks, so you would hide away your gold or your silver or any of your coin, and so it was very vulnerable all the time. A moth could get in and eat through a silk garment or a fine garment, and it would lose its value completely. And the elements could get to precious metals and tarnish them. And of course, if you had all of your worldly wealth, 10 silver coins in a bag hidden underneath your bed, and a thief broke in, it would be gone. And thieves were everywhere. And so money, Jesus said, if you're trying to hold on to your money, well, this world is a very, very unstable place to do that. I think if we were talking about it today, we would say if you're trying to accumulate money today, we're not so much worried about thieves and vermin. Probably mice and rats are not going to get in and eat all of our treasure, but market fluctuations and the value of our property could change drastically, right? Something could happen. All of our money and all of our finances are interconnected all over the world. So if something happens on the other side of the world and the supply chain stops, all of a sudden your business isn't valued, it can't move forward. Or if the stock market goes down and your 401k is tied to that stock market, all of a sudden everything you own is worth less in like a day. And so trying to accumulate a solid portfolio is a very risky thing, even in a volatile market where it seems like the market only goes up over and over and over again. And this is true. The more money you have, the more time you spend worrying about protecting your money. I remember when I was in seminary, we had a project where we were supposed to talk about the different economic classes that we saw in a various congregation. He was trying to get us to think about economic classes: the underclass, the working class, the middle class, the upper class. And there are divisions within them among people who study such things. The lower class, the underclass, who are kind of off the grid, the homeless. And then the working class, and then the upper working class, and the middle class, and the upper middle class, and the upper class, and the lower upper class, and kind of dividing all of it in. And so some people said, yeah, in my church, I have some people who are upper class, meaning that they were really, really wealthy. And so our professor said, I assure you, you've never met anyone who is in the upper class. And we all looked at him like, we know some pretty wealthy people. He says, you've never met anybody who's in the upper class. They are off the grid. You don't know where they live. You don't know what they do. You don't have access. You can't tell them. They don't dress ostentatiously. You're talking about people who have generational wealth for generation after generation after generation. For 3 generations, they've done nothing but live off of their wealth. And so he says those people are off the grid. They don't want anybody to know their names. They don't want to know where they live. They spend most of their time, he said, protecting their wealth. If you have a painting on the wall that's worth $500 million, then you're probably not going to leave your doors open in the summertime, you know? And you have to have a whole cadre of people protecting what you own. So that's the extreme, right? But all of us, the more you have, the more you spend time worrying about what you have. So Jesus says, don't store up your treasure here on earth. It's too vulnerable. Instead, store up treasures in heaven. So if we're going to understand that, I think probably we need to know what he's saying and what he's not saying. Chances are, when Jesus says, store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, he's not saying that it's wrong to set aside money for a rainy day, to have a savings account or to have certain money that you can draw on. If something should happen to you, something breaks, something has to be replaced, your job goes through a downturn and you can't work for a couple of months, you should have some money set aside. We know that because in other places in the Bible, it talks about the wisdom of saving during the springtime for the long winter, that kind of issue. So that can't be what he's saying. He's probably also not saying that there's anything wrong with private property. The Bible just assumes private property. It's just an assumption. When God's talking to you about how you handle your wealth, it's assumed that that private property is the way the world runs. There's nothing here against private property. And there's probably nothing here against enjoying the good things that God has given to us. We worship a God who created the world. He created this world of beauty and this world of joy, and he wants us to inhabit it. And so joyfully accepting the good things that God gives and enjoying them is not what he's talking about. So what is he talking about? What is he talking about? Well, if he says, store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where thieves do not break in and steal, I think what he's saying is that if you are storing up money for yourself, then your money will never do anything beyond yourself or anything greater than yourself. So don't look at money as something that you should hold on to for yourself, but as something that you can use for something greater, something beyond yourself. So what is heavenly? Well, the things that matter to God. Think of the things that matter to God. What matters to God? People matter to God, right? So when you invest in people, or when you use your money so that other people can hear about Jesus, and maybe they have a relationship with God, Jesus cares about justice. God loves it when powerful people use their power and influence to protect those who don't have power. So using your money to protect the vulnerable, to do justice, to further knowledge of God in the world, to take care of those who are vulnerable, all those things are investing in heavenly things. And if you only worry about holding on to your money, then you'll never be a part of that. I'll give you an example. So 3 weeks ago, right where you're sitting, I don't know if you were here on that Friday night, but this place was packed out with bingo players. There were tables all over this place. We walked in, Debbie and I, a little bit late to bingo. We walked in, and there were tables all over the place. There were prizes all over the place, and there were people all over the place of every generation. There were seniors here, there were teenagers here, there were families here. There were people from the community that have never been to our church. They just follow where the bingo is. There were bingo groupies that had come. I sat down at the table right over there at a table to play bingo. The people at my table had no idea who I was. They were like, yeah, we're doing up and across now. Oh, you missed one there. They were checking my bingo board. No knowledge of who I was at all. And I thought, who are you people, and how did you get into the MMC? And they had their own chips. They brought their own chips to put down, you know. So it was hysterical. We raised all this money for our senior hires so that they could to go toward the cost of our missions, the missions trips that the youth groups are going to take this summer. So it was all for a good cause, prizes, all that kind of stuff. So, and then that was 3 weeks ago. Then 2 weeks ago, this whole place was again on a Saturday morning filled with tables. It was filled with all sorts of people here to celebrate the FCA Super Bowl breakfast. FCA is an organization that shares Christ through coaches and athletes in the high school and college level. They bring them together, and they share Christ because sports matters so much. And the Super Bowl is a great opportunity to get a bunch of people together. So Matt Hasselbeck, the quarterback who went to the Super Bowl with the Seahawks back in the early 2000s, was here talking about being a football player. And there were tables all over the place. There was food over there. There was slides. This whole thing was just set up, okay, for an FCA breakfast. So it was great. Walked in, filled. Then, two days ago, Friday night, this place was decked out for Night to Shine. So yeah, Night to Shine. Phil was there. Yeah. There was a DJ up here, a DJ who's done 450 weddings, comes every year just to spin. There was don't tell your elders, there was a dance floor right here, okay? And there were tables all over the place. There was karaoke set up there. There were limo drives. And so there were 75 people from the special needs community that came. Each one of them had a buddy. And there were a couple of freelance buddies like myself who did nothing but dance all night long. So and it was decorated all over the place, you know. And then in each one of these times, they take this room, they pack it all up, they roll all the tables away, they stack all the chairs, they vacuum everything, and then they set it up again so that you can have worship here. And then when you're done worshiping, they pack all these chairs up again and roll them back in here so that we can do Awana for our grade school kids so that they can learn about Jesus. We can do middle school youth group on Tuesday. We can do senior high youth group on Thursdays. That happens every week. This place gets used. And the reason it gets used is because 20 years ago, a group of people in our church pledged their money to begin building this building. We asked people for pledges, and they raised $1.7 million, which put a hole in the ground and made some plans and maybe poured the floorings. And then, you know, we borrowed the money to build this building, and then the church came together and paid off the whole mortgage to this building. Some of you who are sitting here remember that. But many of you weren't here. But it was people who gave, and they gave one-time gifts. They gave over the course of 3 years. They gave over the course of 6 years regularly, above and beyond. We had to keep a church running. They gave above and beyond so that this building would be here. They did that not because they were building their own kingdom, but because they said, the money God has given me, I can invest in something larger so that it can be done. I'll give you another example that's completely different. One of the sad things about the pandemic when it hit in 2020 and the whole economy shut down was that there were a lot of small businesses that closed up and couldn't open again, particularly in the inner city and in under-resourced areas. A lot of black and brown-owned businesses in cities closed up and they couldn't open up again. When businesses in the inner city close, it's bad for the whole neighborhood. Instead of having a deli or a laundromat or a store, you have an empty place with a sign across it and nobody there. People lose their jobs. When the businesses are thriving in the inner city, you have community. You have people invested in the community. They have jobs. This is my place. They demand law and order. They want protection. The whole place is revitalized, but the businesses have to stay open. And a lot of the black and brown businesses closed, partly because in these under-resourced communities, they don't have access to capital. In order to start a business, you need capital. You need somebody to invest in you. And oftentimes these communities have been separated from those who give money, who give capital. And so as the pandemic wore on, there were some people that got together and said, I want to change this, and began to talk to other people. There was a Christian man who had worked in community development who wanted to try to open black-owned businesses in Detroit. And as he talked with more and more people, and he realized that this was a problem in all the metro areas, all over the United States. He started talking to people, and they realized they really needed a fund, a mutual fund, an investment fund of hundreds of millions of dollars. And there were people that wanted to give to it. There were banks that wanted to do this, say, we want to help, but we don't know how to help. And so his innovation was, we're going to find these businesses. We're going to go through churches. We're going to go to the historically black churches in the inner city and say, what are the businesses in your community? How can we get investment to them? But you know, even when you find businesses that have a good idea, that that have a smart mind behind it, you can't just give money and hope that it'll work. You have to get the value of that business down on paper. You have to show them how to account, how to do all the backroom type of stuff, so that then you can say, this is my business here down on paper, and somebody with money will say, I'd be glad to invest in that. So they're trying to make this connection. That takes accountants. It takes people who understand money. These are people who understand that money is valuable, but they're not building their own community. They're saying money is a tool. I can use this. Now, I sit in on these calls. I don't know why. I don't know anything about money. I don't know anything about accounting. I don't know anything about this kind of stuff, except that I have connections, and we're trying to get them connected to pastors, to businesses. This story is still being told. It's still unfinished. But it's because somebody said, I'm not building my own treasures. I'm going to use my treasures for heavenly purposes. Because if we can open these businesses and keep them open, we can revolutionize neighborhoods, and we can give people jobs. You want to get people out of poverty? They need jobs. So here's somebody trying to answer that question. There's a lot of smart people. So how do you get to the point where you say, I don't want to hold on to my own treasure, I want to use it for something greater? How do you get to that point? Well, part of it is by paying attention to what you pay attention to. That's kind of what Jesus says in verse 22. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. Look what Jesus says in verse 22. The eye is a lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body is full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be filled with light. Now, partly this is a simple biological analogy. If you can see, then light comes in through your eyes and it hits you and you know where you're going and you can see what's going on. And if you are physically blind, you are walking in darkness, right? But if your eye is healthy, it can see where it's going, it responds to light, it can direct you. But in Jesus' day, the idea of a healthy eye was a generous eye. If you have a generous eye, your whole body is filled with light. If you have an evil eye, because that's what it really means, an unhealthy eye, it means you have a stingy eye. You have a stingy eye. And so, if you are looking and your eye is healthy and looks to be generous, your whole body will be filled with light. But if you have a stingy eye, you want to hold on to your stuff, then you're in darkness. So, what do we look at? One of the problems when you talk to people about what they do with their money, as we all try to figure out what to do with our money, nobody has unlimited money, at least nobody in this room, at least nobody who's talked to me. If you do, I'd love to meet you. Just, to give you counsel, that kind of stuff, So, we all have limited. So the problem is if you've lived for any several decades, you know that one of the things that happens in life is just kind of societal inflation. What you need to have to be a normal person today seems like so much more than what you needed to be a normal person 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 80 years ago. To be a normal person feels like, you need all these gadgets, like you need a small computer in your pocket, which we talked about last week. A $400 phone is a normal thing. Everybody has it, right? You need an enormous kitchen. You need a car that's leased or new, right? A lot of what's fun around here is that when you see young couples start looking for houses, and a lot of the neighborhoods, a town like Midland Park has been around for 400 years, right? So there are old houses in all these towns, and you go into them, you say, so what room is this? And you say, this is a bedroom. And you say, but it's so small. And you say, yeah, it fits a twin bed and a dresser. We raised 2 kids in this room. There was a bunk bed. That was all that they had. You're like, it's so small, you can't fit anything in here. Yeah, well, that's what bedrooms used to look like in the 60s and 70s. And anybody who was raised in that era know, yeah, your bedroom was just like your bed and a dresser, and that was it. Now a bedroom is like an expansive lounge. One kid, that's the sitting area, this is the cafe, this is the hot tub, this is my, you can't make a bedroom big enough. It's like, you could give a tour of a master bedroom in a new place. Like, this is where we sleep. When this is the doors that close, this is my closet, And so, and that's just normal. That's just normal, right? You move into an old house, you say, where are the outlets? And you say, the plug is there. When they made this house in 1941, all they needed was one plug. Now you need all of them. That's just normal, right? So being normal is very difficult. And if your eye is focused on what you need to keep up with everybody else, you'll always be out of balance. Because in order to sell you stuff, we have to make you think that you need something else, right? And so that's just the way the world works. There's societal inflations all over the place. But if you have an eye on how can I be generous, it's not a question of saying, how can I say no to all the stuff that other people want me to buy? It's, how can I be generous? What is the promise? Your whole body will be filled with light. When I think of that phrase, your whole body will be filled with light, I think of what it's like to watch some of the people who have worked with some of our ministry partners. I find myself thinking about the Great Falls Center that Servant's Heart is working in and through. About how somebody owned that building and said to Johnny, I want to give this to you. I don't want to sell it and repurpose it. I want it to be used for something. And gave it to Johnny, who said, even for me, this is a big building with a lot of work that needs, And then as people started to work on that, the idea of building in a community center in Patterson in view of the falls came. And then many of you realized that they were going to start trade schools down there. And they're regularly training people in all the trades. And so some of you realize, wait, I know how to do carpentry. I know how to do electric. I know how to do plumbing. This is figurative. I don't know how to do any of those things. Other people say those things. And then they say, I could go and teach that to somebody else. And when I talked to Johnny about the amount of people volunteering with Servant's Heart in the schools that they do, the workmanship program, all I can say is they're filled with light. They come back and they're filled with light because something that they're doing, they're investing in a person who is discovering that they could have a trade that could get them a job, that could change the trajectory of their family, and their whole body is filled with light. That's what happens when you start doing God's desire with your abilities. When you have a generous eye, like, what can I give away? What can I help? What can I invest in? We did our Christmas offering with New Hope Ministries down in Prospect Park. Thank you, hon. They're gonna rebuild another building. And some of you could be part of volunteering to rebuild that, but when it's up and running, they're going to do even more stuff to bring people out of poverty, to help people learn the things they need to become citizens, to learn the languages. You could go down and you will be filled with light. When that building is done, we'll see pictures of it, and you'll know that what you invested in Christmas 2023, you'll be filled with light. Yesterday, Debbie was giving a tour to some people of her facilities down in Hawthorne, which is very much the same story. This beautiful building that people sacrificed and donated to build. And then I was listening to this one young couple. They're young. They just had their first child. And they go to Rock Point, the church right around the corner over here. And they were saying, we decided that we wanted to build our marriage on what mattered. And we decided we wanted to be generous. That we wanted generosity to be a mark of our marriage. And so that meant that they sat down and said, okay, what percentage of what we have can we give away? Who are we going to give it away to? They're going to be proactive. One of the ways that you balance between that wanting not to build your treasure on earth and at the same time enjoy the good things that God has given to you, how do you balance that? One of the ways to balance that is to say, let's sit down and look at what God has given, and let's set a percentage. 5%, 10%, 3%. Let's set this. This we're giving away. And we're giving it away to here and to here. We're giving this amount to the church, we're giving this amount to this ministry, and we're going to give it away. And then I'm partnering with God in what he's doing. I'm doing it deliberately. And so then after you've given this percentage of money away and you realize at the end of the year that God has blessed you, you've met all of your bills, and you have this amount of money left over, and you can go take your family on vacation, you go on vacation, you thank God for his provision. You don't live with false guilt because you know that you sat down and said, we're giving this away. And maybe you start to say, we could do more. Because now you have a healthy eye that's saying, how can I be generous? And so, but even just to say you should set a percentage, you should look to be generous, it doesn't really get to the heart. There's another step that you need to get to in order to be a person who has a healthy eye, who partners with God in what he's doing in the world. And that's in verse 24. Jesus said, ultimately, what you do with your money is about who you worship. Your money follows what you worship. So Jesus said, here's the problem in verse 24. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. What Jesus is saying is, money is a really great tool. It's a great tool to be used. God can use it for a lot of things, and you can be a part of that, but it's a lousy God. Money is a great tool, but it's a lousy God. As a God, it's insatiable. It always asks more. It wants more and more and more. If money is your God, it just keeps wanting more and more, and it drives you through guilt and fear and envy. It's going to make you feel envious. It's going to make you feel small. It's going to make you feel scared. And so it's going to demand more and more and more. So it's a lousy God, but it's a good tool. If Jesus is your God, then money can be your tool. If Jesus is your God, money can be your tool. So then you say, yeah, but why would I want Jesus to be my God? Why would I want that? And I think the answer to that is in the heart of what the good news of Jesus is all about. That Jesus was generous with you. Jesus, as the Son of God, was in a position of power, of great power and great wealth, seated by the Father, with the Father from eternity. He was there when the earth was made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made, the Bible says. And Jesus gave that up and came to earth to save you. He used his position and his privilege as the Son of God to give his life for you. If Jesus was just another person, then his death would have been just an unfortunate injustice. But as the Son of God, his privilege could bring your atonement. His death could be for you and for me and for all of us as an atonement for our sins so that we could have a relationship with God. But he offloaded all of that privilege. That's what Christmas is all about. When Jesus was born, Jesus offloaded all of his privilege. He said, I'm not using it for me, I'm using it for you. And then he says, here's what I want. I want you to receive that. I want you to receive that grace. I want you to receive that forgiveness. I want you to see my love. And then when you've really inhabited and understood my love, then I want you to join me and to use the things that God has given you. Your money, your ability, your talents, with me to tell others about me and to further my kingdom. I'm asking you to do what I did for you, because then your life will be filled with light. Because that's life. That's the life that you want. But the only way you can get there is by moving money to where it's a tool and moving Jesus into the center of your life. So as we close, we're going to be singing about God's goodness. I don't want to apply the sermon by saying, therefore, you need to think about doing this with your money. What you need to do is think about the goodness of Jesus to you. We're going to sing, you are good. You are good. We're going to say, your goodness is running after me. And when you really grasp that the goodness of God is running after you, that he has saved you, that he promises to protect you, that he loves you, then using your money to his glory is just the most natural and joyous thing in the world. Let's worship him together. Father, you are good. You created this beautiful world for us to inhabit. And your deep desire is that we'd have a relationship with you, and out of that relationship, to love others, to love you, to use what you've given to us for the furtherance of your kingdom. Father, I pray that as we worship, you would touch our hearts and we would surrender again to you, our God. In Jesus' name, amen.